Hello, my name's Peter. I have been collecting used paperbacks for the last few years. Every time I travel, I like to hit up thrift stores just to see what I can find. I've accumulated many books. This is literally just a small fraction of what I have purchased over the years is on screen. But anyway, I recently was in the Midwest for a couple of weeks because I had a couple of different weddings to go to, but they were awkwardly spaced apart. And so I used that as an excuse to, travel the country a bit and hit up lots of half-price books, lots of more mom and pop thrift stores along the way. And I ended up getting quite a few interesting reads to the point where I thought, why don't I make a haul video about it? So without further ado, I guess I'll just jump in. This is mostly going to be kind of classic fantasy and sci-fi. That's what I have most of a predilection for, but there's also going to be a lot of kind of capital L literature as well. Speaking of which, the first book that we got here is Mason and Dixon by Thomas Pynchon. I will admit that I'm a little bit of a Pynchon normie. I have only read The Crying of Lot 49. I have Gravity's Rainbow around here somewhere, but, for a long time, pretty high up on my list is like, I need to get Pynchon pilled, right? And Mason and Dixon, which is kind of more of a 19th century Melville-esque historical. It just seemed more up my alley, even if it is allegedly very hard. But it's taken me a very long time to find this book because I wanted to find a copy with a real spine. And you think that wouldn't be a high demand in current year, but it is a high demand. You go to Barnes & Noble and sometimes they will have Mason and Dixon, but they won't have a real hardcover. They will have what I refer to dismissively as the paper brick, which is to say they'll have a book which has the dimensions of a hardcover, but it's printed as a paperback. And so there's like next to no spine. It's a book that's designed to look good on a shelf and not designed to be read. So like every time I've gone to a Barnes & Noble, which is somewhat infrequently, but every time I go to one, I was like, they have Mason and Dixon. And the book is literally falling apart in my hands before I even have a chance to purchase it. And I'm like, oh no, this is going to be a thick book. And I need it to be able to stay together as I work through its 1,000 pages. It's actually more like 750 pages, but still, it's a bit of a chungus. Okay, next up is The Valiant Papers by Calvin Miller. I just saw this on the shelf and I had to purchase it because I read through Calvin Miller's other 3 books, his trilogy, The Singer, The Song, and the finale earlier this year. I actually have them over here. I don't want to do too many object lessons, but I can pull them out. I got them just because they're like some of the most interesting looking books I've ever seen. They're in this like weird rectangular shape and they have just like such gorgeous art. And what it turns out is that, okay, so you've heard of the C.S. Lewis guy. What if C.S. Lewis was way less subtle? There are these kind of, these prose poem allegories for, the New Testament with a bit of an evangelical bent. And I'm not an evangelical by any means, but I still found them fascinating reads just from a prose standpoint alone. And it turns out he has a 4th book, which is, I guess, more of a contemporary read. It's probably still It's about a guardian angel helping people in Buffalo, New York. Do you remember that TV show where, I forget the kid's name. What's she talking about, Willis? That kid was a guardian angel who helped people in need. I am totally messing this up. Anyway, ignore me. I'll bring it up later Gary Coleman. It was called The Gary Coleman Show. So like, Gary Coleman was an angel and he's like helping out people. And every time they're like, oh, my name is Jessica, but no one can help me go to the prom. And Angel Gary Coleman would be like, what you talking about, Jessica? A truly bizarre project. Anyway, I have no idea if this is good or not, but now I have all the Calvin Millers, evidently. The King's Damosel by Vera Chapman. This is a mid-20th century YA novel about a girl who wants to be a knight, but no one wants to let her be a knight because she's a girl. But, when King Arthur is inopportuned in some way, she ends up helping out, and even at the end, it seems she doesn't become a knight, but she does become a damosel, which, in the English peerage is the lady equivalent of knight. So, I guess that's pretty good as well. And if that sounds at all familiar to you, you should know that it is the inspiration for the 1998 Warner Brothers animated musical Quest for Camelot, albeit with a ton of changes, probably no talking dragons or whatever, voiced by Eric Idle. I last saw Quest for Camelot a couple of months ago when I did magic mushrooms for the first time. I was under a psychedelic influence, and I had the time of my life. I was cracking up so hard every time King Arthur came on screen because he is such a useless character. The kingdom is under attack, and he's always like, oh, I want to help, but I'm so weak. And I giggled to no end that this, pinnacle of, traditional masculinity was just like so useless. It's like he kept giving excuses, my chest hurts. And Merlin would come in and be like, my lord, you're wounded. Next up, Mona Lisa Overdrive. I've been reading a lot of William Gibson this year. I don't really like his work that much, but I mean, that sounds, that's heresy, I know. But I mean, like, I appreciate it. I just don't like reading it because every time I read a sci-fi novel, and cyberpunk is like the most guilty of this at all, where they just throw jargon at you. I just don't dig sci-fi jargon very much. And so like I did end up on a reread. I ended up enjoying Neuromancer. I like most of the stories in Burning Chrome. Johnny Mnemonic. I did not like Count Zero, so hopefully Mona Lisa Overdrive will hit me. By the way, what a great title. Mona Lisa Overdrive. Notice that metrical pattern. I think they're trochees, right? Dudun. Mona Lisa Overdrive. It just sounds so sick. Is this Mona? Is this Mona Lisa? Is she gonna overdrive? I don't know. But I bet it's gonna be pretty cool. The Mask of Apollo by Mary Renault. Mary Renault is one of the preeminent historical literary writers of the mid-20th century. She sort of specialized in writing books about ancient Greece. She has a trilogy about Alexander the Great, a couple of books on Socrates or whatever. I think this is one of her only books which isn't about a famous person. This is about an actor named Nikaratos. But what made Mary Renault very interesting for someone who is writing in her time period is that she was like one of the first, I would say, mainstream authors who openly acknowledged homosexuality in ancient Greek life, or even talked about homosexuality at all in like a casual and not condemnatory way, right? And it's interesting because like JFK loved her, you know. I think he said she was his favorite author, and it's just it's fun to imagine him being like just reading about all this hot gay sex that Alexander the Great is having with what's his name? I don't remember his name. The Bagoas. There it is. I was able to remember it by pretending I was Colin Farrell in the Oliver Stone Alexander. The Phoenix Exultant. I started collecting John C. Wright books. Because I don't know if these books are. Here's the thing. John C. Wright is like a capital L libertarian, and I'm buying these books. I mean, this is supposed to be his like good series before he really goes off the deep end, but in every single author photo, he is tipping his fedora in you know. So I keep buying these books and I'm like, can't wait for the fedora tip, and there's no fedora tipping picture. Drats. Oh, the novelization of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino. The new novel based off of the film. So Tarantino wrote this himself, because in his more recent years, you know, he is trying to spread out beyond just being a director. Now he's a podcaster. Wowzers. Anyway, maybe it's good. Maybe it's good. Oh, The Maze Maker by Michael Ayrton. Speaking of ancient Greek, this is I think a classic literary novel about Daedalus and how he built the ancient labyrinth of Minos to capture the Minotaur. I actually own this book already, but I have a habit of, it took me a couple of years to find the book the first time. And I have a habit of when I run into a very rare book in the wild, I want to buy a second copy just so that I can give it to a friend and say, hey, do you want to read this with me, buddy? And so maybe I'll get around to it this year. Oh, this is the adaptation, the novel adaptation of The Sword and the Sorcerer, which is it's like an Italian sword and sorcery movie. I mean, I guess that's obvious, but I do really like watching 80s fantasy films. And by 80, I actually like watching 80s fantasy films. Like, a lot of people say that, and they mean like, I don't even know what. But the point is, like, if you want to watch 80s fantasy, it's mostly really low budget Italian movies of just like sweating dudes running around. And like, that's where the real magic lies. And the greatest fantasy movie of all time, as we know, is Kroll. If you're not on the Kroll train, then buddy, you got something in store. The Well at World's End, Volume 1. This is the Ballantine edition of the classic William Morris novel, who is like this 19th century guy who single-handedly innovated, renovated, whatever, I feel so stupid. Like, he has a huge biography. He's like actually a very important, famous person, and I'm just like listing off my vague recollection of the Wikipedia article. But William Morris like helped reinvent like the idea of American craftsmanship in the 19th century. It's like, like, ooh, people should be making crafts at home. And, it's like, oh, so it's like quilting. All these quilts are inspired by William Morris's works, or tables, and I am so underselling just like this man's legacy. But he also wrote fantasy novels in the 1890s or whatever that were deeply influential on Tolkien. And so this is volume 1, importantly, because I keep finding volume 2 in the wild. And I've been looking everywhere and everywhere for volume 1. And now I have both halves of The Well at World's End in the Ballantine edition. And hopefully I can get around to reading it sooner rather than later. Oh, The Dragon and the Unicorn by A.A. Atanasio. What a name that is. Triple A as your initials. Unbelievable. This is supposed to, I think this is the first in a series, but this is supposed to be a very weird take on the King Arthur myth. Like, it has dragons and Romans and demons. On the back is the phrase, the electron glow of lost heaven. So, that kind of implies a bit of a science fantasy angle. A Midsummer's Tempest by Poul Anderson. I read The Broken Sword last year. It's one of the greatest fantasy novels I've ever read. The Broken Sword is like, what if The Lord of the Rings was... Well, okay, The Broken Sword came out the exact same year that The Lord of the Rings did. And it uses all the exact same influences, which is to say all the old Viking tales, sort of the Icelandic sagas, the Eddas, etc. And so you can sort of see those similar tropes, like, the sword that was broken, the magic ring, like trolls and goblins and whatnot. But the difference is, the secret to Tolkien's magic is that he's taking all these Viking mythic tropes and he's tempering them with Christianity to sort of make it like an ultimate good versus evil. He's sort of sanding the edges off and he makes it a lot more approachable. While Poul Anderson, who is this Danish American, right? So he grew up with all these Viking tales. He just delivers straight Viking nastiness. So it is filled with murder and revenge and incest, and it is like one of the most gritty, grimdark things you'll ever read. And it was written 70 years ago. And anyway, Midsummer's Tempest is his take on Shakespeare. So I am very interested in how that's gonna go. Oh, Engine Summer by John Crowley. Very good. I read Little Big last year. Little Big is awesome. It's such a beautiful book. And then Engine Summer is, it's not his first book, but it's his first breakout book. It's sort of a post-apocalyptic slice of life in a world where I've read the first quarter of this before. I read it on the Internet Archive because I have been struggling to find a copy of it IRL. And it just has this like gentle lilting prose that is influenced by Native American culture in ways that maybe it's problematic. I don't know. The idea is they're all calling each other like Running River and, dances with owls or whatever, because they're living on this commune like thousands and thousands of years in the post-apocalypse. But there's kind of, I guess you could call it a gentle Book of the New Sun, because the cultural context that it is in is so radically different from anything that you're prepared for, but you have to just sort of gently glean what is actually going on just by how the characters talk to each other, just by, they're simple. But like I said, it's gentle, it's just all about conversations about family and growing up and whatnot. And I look forward to actually getting to read the rest of the book. Jericho Moon by Matthew Stover. This one's a bit beat up. That's my fault. I accidentally spilled something on it on the car ride back. I have just gotten into Matthew Stover earlier this year. I am currently reading Heroes Die, the first of his Acts of Cain, and wow, what an excellent novel. And he hasn't written all that many novels, so now I want to get every single one thing he wrote. And so he wrote a book called, I think it's like Iron Dawn or something. He wrote a duology set in the Bronze Age, sort of about a barbarian going to ancient Tyre. And so this is the second book in that duology. So now I have both books, and now I can read it. Because the thing of when you're reading these old series is, you don't really want to read it unless you have all of the books, because it's not going to be at your local library. You don't know when you will ever find the rest of it. So I'm happy to dive into that soon. Christopher Stasheff, The Warlock in Spite of Himself. I've never read any Stasheff. I don't know anything about this book. I only got it for the tagline. An interstellar romp proving once and for all that science and sorcery can, in all caps, can mix. I mean, damn, I gotta see for myself. What if science and sorcery can mix, huh? Oh, The Golden Torque by Julian May. I have been collecting all of the different Julian May books because, I am interested in female authors of the 20th century. I think they're deeply underrepresented in a modern book discourse. Everyone's like, what about Ursula K. Le Guin and Olivia Butler? It's like, yeah, but there's also, those are excellent authors, but there's also 40 more who we're not talking about. And so Julian May wrote this 4-part and later 9-part with different spin-offs and sequels, science fantasy prehistoric series called The Saga of the Pliocene Exile, which is about a bunch of psychics who get sent 400,000 years back in time, and they're all fighting each other. There are people from the future who get sent 400,000 years back in time, and they're all creating kingdoms and, doing Game of Thrones shenanigans. And honestly, it just seems really cool. I don't know, it seems cool. I bet it's gonna be cool. Oh, Thomas the Rhymer. This is one of those 1990s, fantasy novels. This was a big deal in the 90s, and now no one talks about it anymore. And maybe it's good. Abducted by the Queen of Elfland, True Thomas, the brilliant rhymer, lives unaging with her in fairies in human splendor for years beyond count. It's also a fairy romance. Wow, would you believe that? Thomas the Rhymer is the name of a classic folk poem, and I think that what's her name? Ellen Kushner did is she interpolated this actual, sort of medieval story into a full-length novel. And that, the best thing I've read this year, Evangeline Walton's Mabinogion Quartet, did a very similar thing. So I have high hopes for this. Peregrine Secundus by Avram Davidson. I think I also have somewhere around here. Nah, I don't know where it is. I think I got the first book in this series too. I've been interested in Avram Davidson. This is sort of a fantasy series that's set in the Dark Ages. And here's the thing. I don't know much about it. I just know that it's going to be cool. And I know that it's famously incomplete. I think there's the first book and then this one. And then I don't think he ever got around to writing the third book. I think his son might have written a third book. Question mark? Who knows? Oh. Oh, The Hound and the Falcon by Judith Tarr. I actually own this already. Like I said before, I just wanted to get a second copy so that I can give this away to a friend. This is her fantasy series that evidently it combines elves with the Fourth Crusade. And if you know anything about, the Fourth Crusade, that's the really crazy one. Everyone sort of says like, oh, the Crusades are people going to the Middle East and, slaughtering innocents. And that is true for many of them. But the Fourth Crusade is you have all these crusaders who go to Constantinople, and then they get so bored that they just loot Constantinople. They don't even make it to the Middle East. They just ransack and pillage the capital of the Christian world at that time, and they just go home with all the loot, and it's sort of seen as the absolute dark watermark of what is already, let's just admit it, a very ignoble history of raping and pillaging. If you've read Baudolino by Umberto Eco, that also takes place in the Fourth Crusade. And anyway, I want to know how Judith Tarr brings elves into the equation, huh? Speaking of Judith Tarr, I think this will be the last book. I went about half of the books I have. I'll make this a part 2 because there's a lot of books, and my 2012 camcorder can only record 30 minutes at a time. So this is a good jumping off point. I also got another Judith Tarr book, a stunning new novel of high fantasy and the author of the Hound and the Falcon trilogy called In the Hall of the Mountain King. I know literally nothing about this book. I only picked it up by the vibes alone. Look how sick this cover is. I love this sort of sketchy art style. There's a certain vibrancy to it that I long for. I say sketchy, what I mean is you look at the colors and it's clearly done with colored pencils. And colored pencils are hard to do. They usually give your work a DeviantArt vibe. But instead, this is something about a Sun King, seems cool. I've been saying that with a lot. That's the thing, is that when you don't know, either I know a lot about the book going in, or I don't know about the book. But if I don't know about the book, then I bought it for a reason. But anyway, thank you for sitting with me for this little journey. I think this went very well. I was really nervous. I was like, oh no, am I gonna have to edit all of it? Am I gonna have to have 1,400 jump cuts in a video like Jenna Marbles? That shows how old I am. But no, I think I did a decent enough job directly rambling. So yeah, I guess I'll post this and I'll see how it goes, but hopefully I'll talk to you again soon, and we can go through the rest of my pile. There's a crate right off screen, you see. All right, bye. Beep boop. Love you.